Good evening and welcome everybody to NYC Film Green Office Hours. My name is Shira Gans and I'm the Senior Executive Director of Policy and Programs, the New York City Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. I'm also the Director of our NYC Film Green program. Our office, which we affectionately like to call as MOME, our agency's purpose is to support the creative sectors in New York City. We have a special focus on film as we're basically the city's film commission and we permit all on-location film production. We also have a suite of programs to support the industry through workforce development and events. Our NYC Film Green program is intended to promote sustainable film production in the city because we believe an important component of the industry is to strive to reduce our environmental impact. So during our office hours series, we always dive into a different sustainable production topic. And our goal in doing that is really to offer insight into the different trends in the industry, to offer best practices, and to also offer insight into the new technologies and strategies for reducing your impact. So we always have great panelists on representing interesting organizations and companies, but you know, New York City is full of a million amazing vendors who make up the mosaic of New York City's film and television industry. So I just want to say that though we're featuring certain folks tonight, there are folks all throughout New York who are doing the work. And unfortunately, I think a panel, you know, with hundreds of different businesses would not be as productive of a conversation, but I do want to give that shout out. So a big thanks to everyone at MOME who helps make these happen, to Earth Angel, our partner in producing these. And without further ado, I'm really excited to talk about sustainable energy strategies tonight. So I hope our amazing panelists can now turn on their microphones and their cameras. Hello, everybody. Great to see you guys. So Jendra, can you kick it off and introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Jendra Jarnagin. I am a freelance director of photography. I've been working in New York City for about 30 years. My credits include the TV show East New York, shot in New York, as well as Emily in Paris, shot in Paris. And prior to being a full-time DP, I was a local 52 electrician back before LED lights. So have some history with the way that crews operate and how set lighting works and power needs, etc. I've been an environmentalist my whole life, and I've been getting more and more involved in the sustainable production space.
Amazing. Iris.
Hi, my name is Iris Singh, and I work as a rigging gaffer in the film and television world. Rigging gaffer works with the shooting gaffer and a cinematographer like Jendra. We scout locations and we're responsible for the lighting and the electricity that powers film sets and whatnot. So to that end, the rigging gaffer does all the prep and infrastructure that is needed. Before the shooting gaffer comes, they light the sets. And in doing so, we save a lot of time and we save man hours or person hours, if you will. And that is the summary of what I do. And we'll dovetail into energy sources.
Yeah, we'll dive into that a bit. Kuldeep.
Yeah, hi, my name is Kuldeep Singh, and I'm one of the co-founders of Saniset Fleet. We provide mobile power solutions to film and TV, amongst other industries. Everything from mobile BESS systems to charging options with fast chargers as well, and then even transportation solutions. We're super excited to be here today, and happy to learn from all of you that are watching, and also from the panelists as well.
And last but not least, Keith.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I'm Keith Gordon. I run Emerald Green Trailers. We're a solar and battery powered trailer company serving the Northeast. We have all the cast trailers, hair, makeup, wardrobe, all of that good things. And I'm a member of a family of companies that operate our trailers nationwide for the film and television industry.
Great. Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm excited for our conversation. I think it's exciting because we have you guys all coming at from a little bit of a different angle. So each month when we have these, we're dealing with a different topic, and I'm not always sure exactly for everyone who tunes in their level of knowledge or where they are in the value chain of film production. So Iris, I guess, could you kind of set the stage, so to speak, of kind of what are the energy concerns, what are the power concerns, when we're thinking about energy strategies?
On a traditional film set, we always use diesel generators. That is when we're on location, and that's how we supply mobile power to sets. There are two components of every set. There's base camp, which would include all the trailers, hair and makeup, star trailers, and so on and so forth. And then we have working trucks, which are the props, grip electric camera trucks that's closer to set. So it's two different encampments, so to speak, with two different power needs. And that is when we're on location. And then sometimes when we shoot inside a studio, we will use, grid power, studio power. And that's sort of the rough electrical needs that, are currently being used.
Got it. So I know one of the challenges is diesel generators, and I guess Kuldeep, maybe we could take a step back as terms of origin stories. And I think we get focused on this issue as if it pertains specifically to this industry, but it's kind of a broader issue. So would you mind kind of telling us your origin story that you shared about how you got interested in this particular issue?
Yes. We have young children, and we were going to a kid's birthday party at a park, and we noticed a lot of the Honda putt-putt generators. There was different installations for children and some lines, and we noticed with these Honda putt-putt generators, obviously we all know the fumes and we hear the noise, but we were just thinking about it with young toddlers and just understanding like what type of world are they going to live in when we look at the ports and when we look at drayage and some of these other industries, and the life expectancy is much lower in some of those areas with some of the exposure to some of this. So that I think helped with the inception of just understanding what else is out there, what else can be used. And then we actually called some of our friends in transpo on film sets, with background in film and TV, just to understand what's going on. And that actually was a first foray into some of the smaller systems, and then now moving to much larger power systems.
Yeah, thanks. So I think that's kind of an important context, because we can get into the weeds and all these discussions about, whenever I'm prepping for these, there's always all these terms you guys use that I need to educate myself on. But the bigger picture of it is that this is a health and safety issue. And so as we educate ourselves and make strides towards incorporating more sustainable practices, either at set or at home, it's really about creating a safer and healthier environment for each other and for our kids and really for everyone. So I'll say that. So I guess I'm going to turn to you again, Iris, because when we spoke, there's this issue that comes up about not only is diesel obviously not great, but that there's a specific issue with the generators themselves and their capacity versus their how they run an actual load. So could you kind of dive into the technicalities of that for us?
Yeah, traditional film generators, diesel run, are about 1200 amps to about 1400 amps. And in previous years when we used lights, tungsten lights, HMI lights, that's what we needed, right? As with the advent of LEDs and better cameras, that sort of need has gotten less and less, and these diesel generators are now running at maybe not as much as they could be. They're running at maybe 50 or 60% of their capacity, and that is actually super inefficient. A generator really should be running around 80% for it to be efficient. And then the thing is, I'm not sure that there are that many new diesel generators being created or that are lesser in power. We just use the 1200, 1400 ones because that's what we have. And that sort of leads to this generator being used at 50% of its capacity.
Got it. And so then can you sort of explain a little further? So if it's at 50% of its capacity, how much is it burning more, or is it
Exactly? It's being used inefficiently, it's burning more, and you're using less of it. It's just being wasted. And it's fossil fuels that we're burning, and all the things we discussed earlier, the smoke and all that, and the gas, all that's being burned.
Okay.
So a solution could be to size down. Right sizing a generator is probably, a minimum thing we could do, except that such generators generally don't exist. Well, I mean, they could exist, they just haven't been used previously.
Got it. And so that's clearly a barrier, and that's part of the problem, right? As we define it, is that comes up a lot, right? Diesel's not great, then the generators are inefficient, and then we're using them inefficiently. But Jendra, when you and I spoke, you kind of got to some other maybe cultural aspects to the industry that you also think are part of the problem or a barrier towards folks thinking more strategically or sustainably. Could you talk a little bit about some of those dynamics?
Yeah, so as Iris was explaining, the generators that we are using that are the ones being provided by the companies that provide generators to us are overkill. They're designed for, as Iris said, like the power needs back when we were using lots and lots of power. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg kind of a thing where the companies are, if it's like, let's say a generator has a certain lifespan and it's time to retire it and buy a new one, the company that is providing it is probably going to be like, well, do I buy the smaller one or do I buy the bigger one? Well, they keep ordering the bigger one, so I guess they need the bigger one. So then they buy the bigger one, but we are only renting the bigger one because that's all that's available to us. So if you're going to have, if you're doing like a long form TV show or a studio feature film, in one location that's running for months, you're probably just going to order, a minimal amount of truck mounted generators that are like, oh, well, this will cover us for the whole job, whether that's, a combi truck with the electric truck or a trailer that stays with base camp. Sometimes the generator is mounted on, the wardrobe trailer or one of the other trucks that it stays with. And you're like, well, this will cover us, so we'll just order this overkill one and hang on to it for the entire job. And then no one's really questioning, are we using this? Like, no one is really, one of the ideas that I heard on some of the panels that I was on with like PGA Green or some of the studios that have sustainability officers is doing an energy audit and having the generator operator actually log each day, like how much amperage are you actually running? So base camp is more of a known quantity, like the trailers with their with their air conditioning and everything else, and they're running for most of the day. Like that's probably fairly consistent for the run of show. But you could be shooting on location, and if you're mostly using LED lights, you could be running the generator at like 8%, 10% of it. Like sometimes you're like, we never used more than 40 or 60 amps today, and we're running an entire 1400 amp generator all day long. And so if anyone is actually paying attention to how much are you using, you would see, and I'm happy to see a lot of nodding happening here by Iris, is that you would see over the run of show, like this was complete overkill and we did not need to order a generator this big. And it's like, again, the companies that are supplying them are buying the bigger one because it's like, if you're gonna, I don't know how much these things cost. I imagine they're expensive because they're specialty equipment, but if you could buy a 1400 amp generator that costs X amount of money, and then a 600 amp generator that costs maybe 70 or 80%, you just spend a little bit more to get the higher capacity, then you're probably like, well, we'll get the higher capacity one and then we're covered and we're never going to run out of power.
It's a very American. It kind of reminds me of like the Costco mentality. And you're like, I could just get this one thing, which I know I'll finish, but I'll get this giant thing that'll go stale and then I'll just throw out because I think it's a bargain. So I guess, we talked a little bit of those dynamics, and I think this comes up a lot about this is a time constrained industry that is expensive. And so there's a desire to never be left without enough. And that can lead to a lot of waste. So I guess, is there anyone else of the panelists who kind of sees that from a different angle, or that it comes up in your work and is part of the challenge beyond the generators itself, but kind of the human component to it?
I think Jendra is right in that if we kept better data, we would have more confidence. I couldn't say, on a day-to-day basis how much we use and when, but if you told me and gave me reams and reams of data, the last 10 TV shows that shot in New York City used only this amount, maybe I might order a smaller generator next time. you
Or
know.
or you could say, oh, last season, if you're on a multi-season show, you can say, okay, sure, I don't know exactly what that other production did and what we're going to do. But if you say, oh, this is how we like this show, this is what we do. And oh, I guess we really don't need that, that thing, then you would have the confidence instead of the need to protect for, oh, what if we have a big day? We can't go tell the DP that you can't have turn any more lights on because we're out of power. And then the DP can't tell the director or the production, like, oh, we didn't account for that. And it's like, it's expected to be a part of your job that you do account for that. So there's this trickle down mentality of sort of being ready for more than you might need, because you don't ever want to be the limiting factor that has to tell someone like, no, we can't do what you want to do.
So this seems like a good time to turn to our other two panelists who have some solutions on that. So maybe I'll start with Keith. I know one of the features of the technology that you guys use is sort of live data. And so maybe if you could talk a little bit about, and we'll get to other features of it, but how does the data work and how have you seen shoots that are using that use it to mitigate their energy use?
There we go. I couldn't get it unmuted. Yeah, so data informs the decision-making process, right? So for all of our trailers, we do have real-time monitoring, which allow you to see the trends of your trailers across the day and across more time, which allows you to make basically a more informed decision on your generator use. Because as Iris said, it's really with the generators, it's about the downtime when they're not being used appropriately that you're being wasteful, right? At this point in time, no one is saying the diesel generator is gone forever and ever, and we're never going to burn another fossil fuel. It's just not where we are yet. It's where we hope to be. But if you knew that you could run your base camp for an extended period of time and then charge all of your trailers at once off of your generator and use that generator appropriately for a very minimized amount of time, not only have you reduced your consumption for every hour that you didn't have the generator running, but while you were running it, you produce less carbon emissions. So when it comes to set, the carbon footprint mostly comes from running generators. So reducing that time is the single largest step that you can make towards sustainable production right now. Until we get fully electric fleets of trucks towing everything to and from, and those being charged from a clean energy source, reducing that time on set and in base camp is what we can do.
So I think
yeah, we'll do.
I was just gonna I agree, agree with what Keith was mentioning. I think to Iris's point, and what we've noticed is when you have low amperage draw from some of these generators, and you're powering hair dryers, or you're powering something where you don't need a lot of power. What we've noticed is you can actually pair a battery with the diesel generator. So you can basically hybridize the diesel generator. So the battery, there's an automatic transfer switch. The battery's kicking on to power some of your your low power needs. And what happens with that is then you're not wasting the generator. You can talk about wasting the fuel, you can talk about the wear and tear on the generator, but these are solutions that can be done now with hybridizing a generator. So that's just something to think about when everyone's always afraid, especially with film, everything's time and money. So everyone's always afraid, is this going to work? Is this solution going to work? But when you think about the low loads, and when we look at data, just even having a battery to hybridize a generator is an automatic savings. We see 40% in fuel savings depending on some of the use cases. But at the end of the day, I think there's more than just offering a solution. Obviously, there's the fear that we all have on a film set of, is this not going to work? Is this solution there? If my team asks me for additional power, am I going to have it available? So I don't think the only solution is using the smaller generators. I do think that if you're going to be ordering multiple generators for your set, I think that you can look at different sizes, but even hybridizing a generator with a battery system, I just think makes sense today based on data.
So I guess I have a couple of follow-up questions for you both. I guess twofold. I guess one, Keith, I'd like to hear from you. you know, your fleet is run on solar, but if diesel is part of, you know, like when you look at the whole way the company has to run, if diesel does play a role. And then also, and I don't know if you guys, Kuldeep and Keith, have this insight into what your clients do, but so you can get the data. I mean, I think we've all like maybe got a Fitbit or something, and then you're like, oh, okay, great. Like, I don't know, I'm never going to look at that information. Like, do you know how the data that your products is producing translates into behavior change? And if it has, or is it just like, we were psyched to get the data, but then we're still nervous and we're gonna like keep going as we were? So those are two questions. I guess, Keith, first, like, can you talk about, since Kuldeep's kind of saying diesel can be part of this interim solution, like, is that part of your business at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So my company does also provide those monster 1400 amp tier 4 final, diesel generators
Okay.
that everyone wants because downtime is the enemy. However, our goal is to reduce that as much as possible. I mean, our record last year was a single star trailer in New York City, ran for 84 consecutive days with 0 shore power and 0 generator power. So that's just solar coming in, filling batteries, and being able to run that particular trailer. But that doesn't mean that all trailers at all times are off grid forever. If you're in the caverns of Midtown, you're not getting solar power. So yes, you have battery power during that. But if you didn't plug in the night before or whatever, you still need to have a means to charge the batteries. And the way to do that most efficiently at this point in time is off of a large generator running efficiently for the minimal amount of time. So again, not saying that there's no place for diesel in our world, not saying that generators are completely gone, just trying to minimize their use and use the best version of the generators that we have that burn the most efficiently and produce the least amount of emissions.
Got it. Thanks. And Kuldeep, so when folks are using your BESS, battery energy storage systems, for folks who don't know that acronym, is there a data report that comes out? Is it usage during the day? And have you seen that data translate into behavior change? Or you might not know.
Yeah, so we have telematic data. We do data monitoring. But I think the key is, if we step back for a second, when we have a client or we have a production or even just someone that asks a question, whether it's a gaffer or someone from another department asking about a solution, we really want to understand what are the energy loads. What is going to be used, what is going to be required, and then as far as behavior change, we've seen some productions are very focused on being green and very, very green forward, and other productions, frankly, are not. And I think that there's probably a few reasons why that's still the case, and I really think a lot of it is fear, because you've been doing a job for so many years a certain way, and there's these new ways to do things, and like we said, in film, everything is time and money. So I think there's that piece of it. But what we've noticed is, when some clients use our products and use some of the other systems that are out there, when everyone is informed with data, over time, you see clients making decisions that are more pro-green, assuming that there is an emphasis or a push to be pro-green, because the data doesn't lie. At the end of the day, everyone can manipulate the data in any which way, but if you're comparing the data apples to apples, pre-using a battery or pre-using a solar trailer, for example, then you're going to understand where there's gains and where there might be losses. So I think using the data to create informed solutions is really what matters. But then, there's politics and there's many other things I think that come outside of the data, which is just, I think an industry, something that is with film and in any other industry.
So I guess I wouldn't know anything about politics. I don't know anything about film. But Jendra and Ira, so can you guys give us some insight into, say you got your hands on this data, like where during the production or the prep would that information be introduced, and how could folks who work on the set leverage that to try to change people's minds or kind of shift the dialogue?
I think personally, for me, I'll be very honest, I was a bit resistant when the batteries first showed up on set. I was like, it's 4 times the size of a little putt-putt. I got to charge two to make sure two work. They're heavy. They take up space that I don't necessarily have. So I think we ran with them for at least 3 or 4 jobs before I thought, oh, you know what? It doesn't have to be 2 and 2. It can be 1 and 1 actually, because this one seems to be lasting longer.
Hmm.
These batteries we use are the smaller ones. They replace the 6500, the little putt-putts we take to parks. It's the kind that you can push right to set, makes no noise. It powers all the necessary things you need, video village, just the smaller things, and an occasional light here and there. Um, these also are the same batteries we take down into the subway, where the subway has always been kind of an issue in terms of power. We've always needed power there and never been able to get it. Places like that, I find that the adoption has been ready and early. The bigger stuff, I think it's going to be harder. I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure the battery technology is there. I mean, I don't know really enough about everything that's out there. We only know what's sort of encouraged by companies like yourself and also by the studios. The studios have sustainability departments that often introduce products to us and so on and so forth. The LED technology for the lights are going the right way. The lights are getting very efficient and requiring less. And now when we do night exteriors, when previously we had big lifts and one generator is, an 800 amp generator to cover that lift, we now use a battery and an LED light in a lift. No parking required, no noise. And to that extent, I think that adoption also has been very easy. So I'm not saying there are no gains. I'm just saying that the gains have been a little slow. And I think a lot of it's just constricted by the batteries,
Well,
personally.
before I do want to have you ask, actually, Keith, cool deep question. But before I do that, I guess, Jendra, do you have thoughts on when data could be introduced, or where along the planning process are you trying to insert these ideas or these new strategies?
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly working on long form these days, so it would be during prep when we're coming up with what the order for the run of show is going to be. So if we had data that showed, hey, generators are, tradition a production of this size, and you're probably going to want to pad it for your own peace of mind, but like here, don't pad the data, but like when you interpret the data, you're like, okay, here's what, another TV show that's comparable in size, did, or here's 3 different shows and here's what their power needs actually were. Then you could have the confidence to say, okay, we don't need, 1400 amp generators for run of show. We could use, if such a generator existed, we could go look for it and say, okay, we'll take, a 600 amp generator for base camp, and we'll take a 600 amp generator for, run of show. And then if we ever are in a situation where we're going to need more than that we would day play, additional plants for those, big spread out setups, which we do anyway. Like, let's say you have your main plant that's, at the electric truck, but as Iris said, you're going to have, a lift down the end of the block. So that's power. So you often will spread out, depending on the location, depending on the scope of what you're shooting, will have, a few different power sources. So, as she was saying with the batteries, that there are new battery technologies that are replacing, your Honda 2000 putt-putts, your, 6500 putt-putts. So if you can, convince your production from the get-go, yes, these are more expensive to rent, but they're more versatile. They're not going to have fuel costs associated with them. They're going to be more friendly to locations. You're not going to have the neighbors yelling at us that it's noisy at this, time of day or time of night or exhaust, etc. I don't want to change the subject, but come back to it at some point, talking more about batteries. When I was shooting in Paris, batteries were de rigueur. Like, that's what we use batteries all the time everywhere. Like there were neighborhoods that did not allow generators, period. And so everything that you ran had to be on batteries. I shot in Charles de Gaulle Airport. And so it was like inside the airport, everything, we weren't going to be running cables across, it was still open to the public, so you weren't going to be running cable across walkways and whatnot. So it was just like batteries everywhere, almost like, think of instead of a light, or every light, or maybe a couple rows of lights together, that instead of running cable back to a generator, that everyone, each one had its own little power bank, along with it. And that is considered to be an expensive approach, in terms of the current costs of the batteries that are high enough capacity. And as Ira said, like you can't just have one of them. They run, if you're going to run them, close to their max capacity, then, I don't know how many hours they'll run for, but maybe it's only 4 hours and you're going to be running it for 12 hours. So you need, multiples to cycle them out, keep them charged, which maybe sounds like a pain in the butt, but like if you're using small generators, like a Honda 2000, that needs to be gassed up every hour, every 2 hours anyway. So we're used to managing those kinds of things, but they are more expensive to rent. So that's another thing about the data. If you throw it into a add-on, like, day played gear, the line item of it's like, oh, we can't afford that. And then it gets cut. Whereas if you're doing it at the beginning, you can approach it more holistically to say, okay, this is more money here, but you're going to save in fuel costs. So then there's still time to, do the budgeting and shuffle the budgeting around. Because normally, when we're talking about being responsible for our department's budgets, we're not talking about fuel. So we have to be sort of educated to think outside of the box to let the line producer and the UPMs know, like, okay, this might seem like it's more expensive, but it could save you money in the long run, or at least be a wash, or not as expensive as it is here to be, et cetera, et cetera.
So that might be a good time. Keith, I know one of the components of the technology you use is the solar ring, right? So maybe you could talk a little bit about, we're talking about the cost, and obviously we can get a little into the cost differential of going more sustainable, but like the sun is free, right? So if you could talk a little bit about how you guys leverage that as part of the system would be helpful, because I'm not sure everyone uses that technology.
Yeah, so the solar ring is what we consider the kind of the future of Basecamp and where everything is headed. And what that is a system that we've developed that allows our trailers to share the solar that comes in through them with one another. So if one trailer already has a full battery, rather than wasting that solar energy because there's nowhere for it to go, it's routed through our battery energy storage system, which we call the electric power station, and then shared back out to the trailers or wherever else you may need to go, because it does have the standard cam lock hookups to power whatever else you may need. So, and now I forgot the second part of the question, Shira.
Oh, I guess the question is, do you have data on, obviously on average, you could be down the financial district where I work, where the sun never touches the ground, or you could be, it could be winter or whatever it may be. But on average, are you seeing that capacity to store the excess energy, defraying all the like costs for fuel or the need to rent generator, like diesel generators and things like that?
So the short answer is it depends, as it does with all of film and television. And really the biggest determining factor goes back to earlier in our conversation, where it's all about the buy-in. When you have customers that have bought into the system, and you have Basecamp GennyOps that are on board, that are open to monitoring the trailers and not running generators to just be able to say, like, I'm done, I've done my thing, carry on, then there are absolutely substantially more savings as a result. So the calculation comes back to how much time you spend not running the generator, what that studio calculates that rate as, because they do have differences in opinion. It is somewhat subjective. Yeah, Kuldeep is smiling. He knows that's true. And when, when it comes down to it, there is a new product premium to both our trailers, to battery energy storage systems. But when you start taking into account the savings that are between the lines, like Jendra was saying, that difference is not nearly as far as you think it is, or you could end up on the savings side. But it really is dependent on the production, where they are, and how they handle the products.
Well, one of the questions that came up when I was talking to you all before, like Iris had questions, and I think Jendra did too, about, well, what is the availability of some of this technology in New York? So Kuldeep, like, do you have enough of these sort of best systems for folks to use, the electronic generators, or whatever the right term is?
Yeah,
to
so
say, you know?
the mobile battery systems are the best systems that we use. So we have some in New York, and we're actually, we're bringing more as we speak. To Keith's point, like, we talk with all the studio sustainability executives. We also work with some of the film schools. We also work with independent productions. So our goal is really to almost change the narrative and help to create adoption and implementation. So we want to learn from people. We want to understand their power needs, their power requirements. I think that we really need to get early on into the production. We're talking about pre-production, really to help plan, how are we going to get those savings? Because there is a premium for some of this stuff, but we've actually seen, we have multiple productions where they're actually saving money if you take into account not having to use the man hours for cabling, if you take into account not the fuel savings. So it's not just hey, the diesel generator costs X and the mobile battery system costs Y. When you actually look at the overall budget, there are cost savings. Now, again, that's not in all use cases. It depends on how they're being used. But I think there's, that's a really important aspect. And we do have battery systems that are available in New York City. We're happy to talk to people about their needs and requirements. We, happy to talk about phone calls. And if we also don't have enough battery systems, we have partners, we have friends. We want to make sure that we can change the narrative and create more education around the solutions with batteries versus, we don't have enough. And because the demand is there, because people are seeing that the technology actually works and it's reliable, which we can get into, a little later, but the demand is there. So we want to make sure that, if it's not just us, the industry, the need can be fulfilled. And it's important to work as a community to make sure that happens.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Again, I mentioned in my opening remarks, but we try to bring folks on to kind of give insight into some of the best practice and some of the latest trends, but there's tons of folks who are vendors and suppliers in the New York City market. So it's not just, these few companies who have the opportunity to come on. There's this whole community, and I think they work together, and just to keep in mind as we talk about this. So I guess I wanted to, it's always fun to talk about the new technology, but there's a lot of independent films in New York, there's a lot of student films, there's a lot of more constrained budgets. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about tying in about, there's now renewable diesel has come into a gas station in Greenpoint. It's now in the Bronx as well. And then, yeah, so I just want to talk about okay, that's cool. Maybe you can't get Keith's trailers. You can't rent Kuldeep's mobile energy battery system. So what do you guys do? Jendra, Iris, are there other strategies that folks can use to mitigate diesel and the more harmful fuels when you're on set?
I think we should normalize tying in more regularly. So getting power from the grid, from Con Ed through, the building that you're working with or whatever is generates way less emissions than all of our little portable generators are way less efficient and way more polluting and way more carbon emissions, et cetera, than getting, electricity through the power grid. So if you're going to be at a location for, any length of time that you're running generator, I don't know what the math is, but like you can either get a power drop from the city for if you're there for a long enough period of time to warrant whatever that, labor cost is to get like a priority, power drop put in for your production, or like if this, it's pretty normal if you're shooting on the 34th floor of an office building, you're going to interface with the engineering department from that office building and get a tie-in, in the electrical closet from the building's electrician to provide that for you. And frankly, we should be doing that a lot more. Like the norm that like, oh, we carry a generator full time, so we're just going to use it. It's like, let's think about not using the generator. Like, let's think about, you're in this location for 3 days. Frankly, you could be there for 1 day and just ask the building for a tie-in,
And so Iris, like on the ground, if you're there scouting, doing that, what are the different ways? I mean, Jendra said maybe in a building, but let's say you're in New York has beautiful residential neighborhoods. Part of the reason people want to shoot here. So what do you do in that case if you're trying to tie in?
I mean, tying is always preferable, and I do often scout with the intention to do that. I mean, the buildings, notwithstanding, even in brownstones where nobody wants a generator parked outside the whole time, with the fact that LED lights can more or less simulate, lights from before, the power needs have gotten a lot less. And a discussion with a amiable, like amenable DP, you can make tie-ins work. Obviously, there are, in residential areas, there's only so much you can pull from these boxes anyway. But yes, we do that. I had in my mind always thought, oh, power drops everywhere because we have to charge electric cars anyway. Like, in this crazy new world we have this infrastructure where electric cars are being charged. In that case, there were basically power drops everywhere, right? I mean, it's the same thing, kind of. Having a localized base camp in strategic parts of the city, let's say we are in the West Village, base camp will always be in X spot, and that spot has a permanent power drop. That would be nice, and all productions could share that kind of thing, and it could also be dovetail with charging stations. I mean, tying into the grid is ideal and probably a much more achievable goal than most people think because of the fact that we're heading towards this, EV situation and whatnot.
And so then is the idea that you could adapt an EV charger?
Yeah, I mean,
other
electricity is
charging?
electricity. If there is a drop, it's just a matter of trying to extract that. It wouldn't be hard at all. I mean, right?
And so I guess I want to talk about that because this has come up on some of the other office hour episodes about the challenge of trying to charge vehicles in New York or the generators. So like, I don't know, Kuldeep or Keith, I mean, Keith is his son, but like, how do you guys make sure that the fleet or all the generators are charged in a city like New York that might not have the EV infrastructure yet as some other locations? Like what are some of those strategies?
Yeah, so for some of our mobile BESS systems, we can actually charge them with a fast charger, like kind of Iris had mentioned. So anywhere where they have, and we actually we have mobile fast chargers. I mean, they have to be moved on a cart. They're a few $100, but it's kind of unique in the sense of where you can have the fast charging capability. We're talking about 60 kilowatt capability output. So that's one situation. And then it really determines, like with some of our clients, like we talk with some of the different departments, and then we can even do trickle charging. So you can have literally, depending on if you have a tie-in or might have power, you can charge some of these things overnight. Or even during the day, they can charge while they get discharged. So you could trickle charge. So, there's multiple solutions. And then, regarding even renewable diesel, like we've had some productions that have even, had to use renewable diesel for a couple hours to charge, to charge some of the battery systems. So there's different options, but I think the key is to strategize where the power is, to strategize beforehand, how things are going to be set up so that we can adapt, with the creative solution with some of these charging options.
Yeah, so Keith, someone in the chat had asked, well, what happens for solar in the Northeast in the winter? So, I mean, what are some of the ways you guys are?
Sure. So, obviously solar, we're subject to the whims of the weather, which is exactly why it's not something that we strictly rely on. So the battery power that we have on board is substantial. We backed up our runtime off of 16 hours under regular circumstances. I'm not talking about that last couple weeks that we had where it was 10 degrees every day. Like, understand that these systems again are off grid under regular circumstances, but at least reducing the reliance on fossil fuel under all circumstances. So we provide the opportunity to charge overnight, so you can come in at 100% battery. And then the other answer of, well, what do you do is you do what you've been doing. So all of our trailers run regularly, and then in the event that you don't have the sun, in the event that you've then burned through all of your onboard battery power, you plug into a regular cable run just like you've had to every single day until now. So
I have a quick question because Kuldeep's used the acronym BESS a few times. Could we talk about what that is?
Yeah, so BESS means battery energy storage system. And so when we talk about a mobile BESS, some of these battery energy storage systems we have, they can be put on trailers or they can be put on like a production van scenario. And depending on power and the setup for the production, some have even done like a twinning scenario where they might put traditional diesel generator with one of these mobile battery systems to then hybridize that traditional diesel generator.
And I love that question because, I mean, someone explained the word BESS to me. And so because I'm in government, we like acronyms. But I think there's just like a lot for everybody to learn. And so just to not assume that if you're trying to adapt these practices and you're trying to learn about it, that everyone else knows more. Even people who are super committed don't always know. And it can be, I think anytime there's jargon, it can be alienating. And so it's really great to ask those questions and just to kind of level set, because it's either it's something new you're going to learn, or actually you already know what it is and you've been advocating for it and you just didn't know that specific term. So I think, a theme that comes up, because I met all of these because I moderate them, is, there's really like a lot of learning to do that people should hopefully not be dissuaded either by fear of trying something new or by fear of I can only do this much, but I can't do everything, so I'm going to do nothing. I think there's lots of opportunities to do different things, and part of that's understanding it. So question that's come up, actually Iris asked before, and now I've seen it in the chat. So what happens to these batteries at the end of, like, what is their lifespan? And then what's the environmental impact when it's the end of their lifespan?
So my particular battery lifespan is around 12 to 15 years. And after that, the hope is that they'll be used by one of the many companies that are buying batteries that no longer have 100% efficacy and using them as their own battery energy storage systems to help normalize grids in areas that have peaks and just like kind of an unsupported area.
That's cool.
And so ours is 13 years is the time frame, and then we also look at having other individuals use some of the batteries once they've reached the end of life when there's some degradation. However, we're also looking at working with, like, there's multiple companies out there that are doing battery recycling now. So looking at sustainable battery recycling solutions that actually makes sense. So that's still, it's in the works. We've actually talked with multiple companies that are looking at different strategies for battery recycling. But we're talking about 5,000, power cycles, which is, approximately 13 years. You really have some time, but it's a big concern of ours and a big environmental concern as well.
Because how long does a diesel generator last? No one knows.
As long as you keep
It's just
servicing
a
it and they
month.
keep making the part,
I was
probably.
gonna say
You
they
can
last
you can rebuild an engine.
exactly. They last for many years if you're rebuilding the engine and if you're doing the regular services.
Got it. And so someone asked in the chat about the availability of renewable diesel. I can't speak to New Jersey, because I don't go to New Jersey because I work for the New York City Mayor's office. No, I'm kidding. Sometimes I go to New Jersey. But you know, that's been a challenge. There is I think in Albany, they're currently working to figure out what the tax credit will be, a kind of carbon market to offset the cost, and that's been approved, but it's now at an agency level. So right now it's in 2 gas stations, as we said, one in Greenpoint by a lot of the sound stages, one in the Bronx, I'm not exactly sure where. And then the city, actually, we have, after many years and a lot of hard work from people at the agency that oversees our fleet, we actually now have a huge contract for renewable diesel for the city's fleet, which is a cool thing because we have a lot of cars. And so I think once that carbon market and that offset comes in, you'll see the price of regular diesel and renewable diesel kind of equilibrate, and then there won't be, I mean, a real cost. Like, I think the main disincentive right now is that it's more expensive. But I know there was concerns when that gas station was considering getting in the renewable diesel, and I think it's been moving. Like, I think it's been a success story up there. So that's cool. And then I guess, you know, so just to keep talking about some of the other alternatives, Kuldeep, you had mentioned propane as a possible solution. And so I just want to make sure we're like talking about that there's like a harm reduction component. It's not like solar or bus, right?
Yeah, so we were looking at some renewable propane solutions to, you know, compared to using renewable diesel. So we're looking at some of those, and then even you know, when we think about hydrogen, you know, obviously with hydrogen, the distribution and the access with the supply chain isn't there today, not yet. In certain cities and markets, specifically California and certain Southern California has more of a established supply chain, but we're just looking at other options where, you know, they can have you know, a better carbon footprint, and it could, you know, provide reliable power, right? So, you know, I think it's almost like, how do we create power banks and microgrids? You know, Keith is obviously working on some of the solar options, but, you know, just really thinking about how do we create that and augment that as we look at different unique power requirements and situations.
So there are 2 other things before we kind of open up into some other aspects of this conversation. So, you know, we talked a little bit about the end cycles, what happens at the end, but Keith, you had mentioned about the materials you guys use to make the trailer. So I think that's another component. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, you know, when it comes to sustainability, one of the big things that people are worried about is also the manufacturing that goes into all of it. So obviously, as a company that started from the ground up to be as sustainable as possible, we take that very seriously. And we do source from as many sustainable manufacturers as we can to provide our products. We manufacture out of a solar powered facility, and we use 75% recycled materials by weight to manufacture our trailers. So like the acoustic walls to stop reverberation are 100% recycled material. All offcuts go right back into the process. So we do take that seriously through and through. And more good sustainable materials are coming online, you know, for everyone. And I think we'll continue to see that in the industry at large.
That's cool. Yeah, that came up when we did one on set design and how, you know, thinking about those materials. And so then, Jendra, you brought something up when we talked before this, which I thought was interesting because I like technocratic things, about the way budgets are different through divisions, and how sometimes, you know, like Keith and Kuldeep have talked about, there's a fuel saving, and that's an offset if you think about the cost dynamically, but that maybe the departments that has the fuel like cost is not the same as who's renting this equipment. And so do you have any suggestion, like, can you talk about that a little bit? And then if you have any suggestions about the way departments might cooperate so that there's a more holistic view of what's happening.
Yeah, I think once the production is launched, you know, and out of the prep stage, that everything is very fast moving and that you're, you know, ordering things that you need for that particular location's needs, et cetera. Like the way that budgeting is handled is very siloed. So, you know, you could say, okay, we'll approve the, you know, X amount of money to spend on the lighting order for, you know, this day's location or whatnot. And I think, you know, unless the producers and line producers are as experienced with thinking about sustainable production, there it's not necessarily occurring to them in the moment that, you know, oh, the fuel savings or those kinds of things. And, you know, uh it's been brought up in the chat as well while we were talking here, like not to mention labor and cable savings. So labor and cable savings is within your department to say, oh yeah, if we get this, then we don't need, you know, this amount of additional day players to, you know, run the cable and, you know, de-rig it, et cetera. But you know, that's kind of one of the benefits of having a sustainability coordinator position on your production, is that they are thinking about these things. They are educated about it. Their entire job is staying abreast of these things. You know, I asked what BEST was, and you even said, like, we don't know the acronym, you know, we don't all know everything, right? Like I've been on, you know, probably 6 or 8 sustainability panels, and a lot of what I know is because of me learning from other panelists. So I'm someone who cares about this stuff and puts a lot of energy into it, but I don't know as much as a sustainability coordinator whose entire job that is. So, or if you're working, you know, for a studio, that there are departments, you know, within the studio that are focused on these things. So yeah, we don't, you know, there are definitely habits that are ingrained to the way that things operate from the status quo, and sort of to get past those, you know, just takes the, you know, initiative and mindset shift of the people who care enough to, you know, educate themselves about
So if you
this.
were lucky enough to have either you're in a studio production that has a sustainability department or coordinator, or you have enough money to have an eco PA kind of company on board, is that something that they would do? Could you go to them and say, hey, like, can you help to manage this budget thing so everyone understands the savings? Or like, how
Well,
does that?
if you're not working on a studio production that's already providing you that person,
Mhm.
like you're doing an indie film that, you know, at least has enough money that you're doing things at a fairly professional level, that you're spending a lot of money, then you can hire, you know, Earth Angels, or like there are, you know, freelance, people, consultants, et cetera, who do that and specialize in that. And you know, the idea is that those people pay for themselves, you know, whether that, you know, someone can do the math on that. I don't want to, like, you know, have false promises
Sure.
on that, but you know, that the idea is that the savings that they facilitate through their consultation will hopefully, you know, make up for, you know, the thinking that this is someone who costs extra, or like you're creating, you know, a job position that you think that you don't need.
Sure.
That's what they do. They know about all
Right.
this stuff that none of us are gonna know everything, because we have our own concerns and our own jobs and our own departments to be worried about.
Sure. So I guess as we come towards the end, one, I'll just say there's some very specific questions in the chat for like Iris and Jendra, so you guys could answer those. But I always like to end with, I think we've talked a lot about the New York City dynamic, so I won't put you on the spot about what's specific to New York, but what are you guys excited about in the future? And you might not have the answer, but are there technologies or shifts in behavior that you think are coming that make you excited? Someone's been asking about hydrogen in the chat, so Keith, I'll start with you. What are you excited about?
Well, of course, I'm excited for more production to come back to New York. I think that's it's something that we're all looking forward to. But for me, it's really just about staying on the cutting edge of the tech that goes into this, and hoping that that continues to open doors within New York City. We all know that we've been to places that are sensitive to having production. And I think with green technologies and removing some generators, that it could open up some doors to some people that have previously not allowed filming. You know, I know coming from locations, I remember I was filming in Central Park and they made me put a drip pan underneath a putt-putt generator that we had there. So my hope is that people like that, places like that, sensitive areas, can become more accessible. So for me, seeing more of New York on screen
I love that.
and get
I was asking, like, I was thinking, that was very inspirational. I was like very technical. You had mentioned two kinds of batteries that I'd never heard of when we spoke, but I like the big picture. But we also mentioned those two.
No, I want to keep those under my vest up for my R&D. Sorry, Shira,
Okay.
that was
All
just
right.
between me and you.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Kuldeep, are there any particular technologies you're excited about, or, you know, just life in general?
So I think, we're always looking at different and, new and alternative battery chemistries. So, not to speak to a couple of them because we also are in R&D with a couple of different chemistries for some of the products. But I think the thing that I'm most excited about for New York and just for film in general is exposure. I think we think about exposure and education, and even with a panel like this, we can all learn something and take this back to others and potentially try a solution or inquire more about a new solution that can actually help in the long run. So I think just by creating more exposure and getting more momentum, there's more openness to try. And I think at the end of the day, what we're seeing with productions, we work with some of the larger sustainability teams and we have big open dialogues about larger directives. That's great. But then when we work with student films and when we work with indie productions and people are really interested and really care about the environment, it's just awesome to see that. I think that there's a gap in the amount of knowledge, because people haven't been exposed to these products and they haven't been exposed to these solutions. So that my hope for 2025 and really beyond is, accelerating that knowledge and the knowledge transfer and the education so that, more people are willing to try an alternative solution.
Okay. Iris, anything you're excited about?
Well, I'm looking forward to this top secret R&D battery that those two have going on. I
Yeah, I
can't wait.
didn't know I was getting.
There are very good ones here now, Iris.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is every job I go on, I meet the sustainability people and they're always introducing me to new batteries. And I'm always like, I am swamped with budgets and lighting things. I think this has been great because it's helped me sort of refocus and think, you know what, it's not that bad. The batteries, they're not that heavy. It's going to be fine. No, it's good. I'm glad that we had this panel and I'm glad that, Shira, you're here to sort of, think big picture.
Oh, thanks.
There are cost savings to be had, maybe, but there are definite cost savings to be had globally and in a larger picture, definitely. So that is, I think, what we forget when we do our little, our budgets.
Thanks. And Jendra, what about you?
Specific technology, I just dropped one in the chat, which was an announcement that came out this week, which is the Anton Bauer has a new location, sizable battery called Eden. So I haven't used it yet, but I just dropped the link to it in the chat so people can see that. But what I'm more excited about than any specific technology is the fact that there are 66 people who showed up for this Zoom. That people are starting to care that basically that there's a culture shift that's happening, that people are spending their time and effort educating themselves about this, that people are showing up. And because at the beginning of being involved in this conversation, it was a bit of an echo chamber that, the only people showing up were the people who were already, fairly motivated and educated about it. And now we're getting more people that are curious about it. And I see strides being made. And also I'm encouraged, how, heads above it was shooting in Europe. Go like a lot of what I see holding us back, shooting in the US in terms of status quo, culture of the way that things are done, and then going and shooting in Paris, and like the norm of how things are done there is that everyone is cooperative with sustainability. Everyone is thinking about sustainability. It's not some, you know, like a groaning pain in the butt that like, you know, the sustainability coordinator is like trying to like, you know, strong arm people into getting with the program. Like everybody is already, and they come from that place first. And so that just seeing that, like, it doesn't need to be the way that it is, you know, here, and seeing the culture shifts happening, you know, slowly but still happening is what inspires me the most.
Well, thanks, guys. I'm inspired by all of your work that you do and you guys coming on and sharing your knowledge. I think, you know, for me, one of the things that makes me hopeful about this is sometimes when you're working on policy issues, it's like there's so many different aspects to it and it's just super complicated. And I think for me in doing this series, I'm hearing that there's a lot of similar themes, which gives me confidence that it can be addressed. So there's generally just, you know, human nature of people are used to doing things the way they've done them, and under a high pressure, time constrained industry, it's harder to change behaviors, but we're seeing that that happens. I think planning ahead is just a theme that always comes up, and I think that's like good advice in all of our lives. And then kind of breaking down silos, so whether it be in these kind of conversations involving government or organizations that are doing that, and then talking across the industry, and then talking across departments. I think, you know, that's a problem that's endemic to every organization and something that can be addressed. And then there's cool technology happening. Some of it's under wraps, some of it we can access today. And then, you know, I think anything's possible in New York City. It's like people come here who are dreamers, strivers, you know, it's a very fast-paced environment, and I feel like we can solve any problem we put our minds to. So I'm really excited you guys all came. We have recorded this. I will distribute the recording. We'll also include all the resources that were put in the chat. So a huge thank you to everyone on this panel, and stay tuned for next month's information. All right, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Very much.